Whether your beer is in a bottle, can, or glass, kick back and relax. It's Better on Draft.
We are live, episode 358 of the Better on Draft podcast. My name is Ken. Thank you so much for joining us. I truly appreciate it. This is going to be a fun episode. We are bringing back the first ever and multiple time. He's probably just a host at this point for the amount of times he's been on the show. Eric Brigham is on with us, but let's go around and see what everybody is drinking, starting with Rob. Rob, what you got?
Today I have Idiot Farm from Carbon 4 Brewing out of Wisconsin. This was my Christmas pickup when I was up in Madison, Wisconsin.
Did you finish your advent calendar start to finish?
I did finish it at start to finish, not a beer a day, but I got it done.
2 beers one day, 3 beers the next,
Yes.
Wendy, what are you drinking over there?
Well, I figure it's kind of a special occasion, so I went with the Mad Elf Grand Cru. And I also got a special present from Santa, and I'm drinking a Duvel Belgian Strong Blonde as a backup.
Well, I decided myself to go and, be my own Santa and refill my kegerator. And of course, always at Total Wine, I could find some Bell's Amber. So that is going to be on draft right here. And just in case I do finish that and I don't want to get up, I do have a Black Phillip from Blake Cider, which is their blood orange and cranberry, a leftover from the holiday festivities for this year. But we do have a guest with us in our virtual studio. Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us who you are, what you do, and then we're going to have some follow-up questions because it's been a minute since you've been on.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me back again. My name is Eric Brigham. I currently represent the Rochester Mills brands for distribution through the state of Michigan. My history has been with Rochester Mills since about 2005, so it'll be 20 years next year. Prior to that, I worked at Big Buck Brewery. I've also had extensive years of service on the Michigan Brewers Guild Board of Directors, and have been in the industry since about 1997. So,
well, we appreciate you joining us. The last time you were with us, we were actually at the Rochester Mills production facility for episode 300. Easily one of my favorite episodes with, of course, our great friends, John Piepenbrock and Aaron Lanktot. But what has changed? Because a lot of things have happened over at Rochester Mills / Two Roots. Give us kind of a lowdown. You don't have to go into necessarily crazy details of what happened, but, how are we where we are today?
Well, you mentioned Two Roots Brewing Company, which was a non-alcoholic beer brand that had acquired the Rochester Mills production facility back in 2019, 2020. And we proceeded to produce their that non-alcoholic beer brand as well as the Rochester Mills brand for distribution. And, unfortunately, Two Roots had a goal to be what Athletic Brewing Company is today. Both Athletic and Two Roots started pretty close to the same same time frame. Unfortunately, Athletic fortunately for them, they were capable of securing funding to grow that brand and the brewery into what it has become today, which is a pretty significantly sized brewery that all age produces non-alcoholic beer. And unfortunately, Two Roots was unable to secure that funding. And over the course of the 3 or 4 years that they were involved with the Rochester Mills Brewery, they threw all their eggs into the basket that never materialized. And unfortunately, that company went out of business, which unfortunately caused the Rochester Mills Production Brewery to go out of business. All the equipment was auctioned off, the brewery closed, and the brand names themselves were being sold. I think a company up in Canada purchased the Two Roots name and their rights to recipes and intellectual property. And then there was a deal for the Rochester Mills name on the table with a certain entity or party that fell through, at which time Mike Plez, who was the original founder of Rochester Mills, along with a partner back in 1998, he was in the position to pick up the brands again and keep them under his family name, basically. And he had asked me at that time, he's like, "Do you want to continue working with me and keep repping the Rochester Mills name?" And I told him that'd be great. And he said, "Okay, well, now we got to find a place to make the beer because we didn't have a brewery anymore." While all this is happening, the brew pub in Rochester was independent of that sale and that deal with Two Roots in the first place, so that was unaffected by the production brewery closing. So they've remained open the whole time and kept producing their own beer for the restaurant. They just are unable to distribute out of that location. So once Mike was the owner of the brand names again, we started exploring different options with contracts. Should we look into building another brewery again? And with the length of time that we've taken to find a location and secure new equipment and do all that, we thought that was more detrimental to the brand than just trying to find maybe a contract arrangement or alternative proprietorship arrangement so that we could get the brands produced quickly and back out in the market. And after talking to several different breweries, we partnering or working with Dragon Mead down in Warren. And since December of last year, almost exactly a year ago, we shipped our first draft shipments out of Dragon Mead. We did draft only for about a little over 4 months, and then finally started releasing packaged beer again in May of 2024. So we've had packaged back in the market for the last 8 months or 9 months, and that's where we're sitting today.
What are you brewing package wise for distribution?
To start out, because we were still working on the details of kind of integrating the two brands under one roof and making sure that there was still a focus on the Dragon Mead production and any other projects and things they had going on, as well as trying to kind of weasel our production into that. We just started out with a small core of 4 beers. We did the Rochester Red, Milkshake Stout, Orange Whip, and Juice Bigelow. And so we did that for, since we started back up again. And then when we launched package, we came out with the Gypsy Goddess as a seasonal release in the spring. And then just this fall, we started diving back into some of the flavored stouts. And so we released Toasted Marshmallow Milkshake Stout in September. And we just released last week the Red Velvet version of Milkshake Stout, which is actually a blend of the stout and the Rochester Red. And our plan is to hopefully keep a calendar of some quarterly released flavored stouts through 2025, as well as a few seasonal beers, a few one-off draft specialties, and then ultimately the goal would be to have the 12 Days of Milkshake Stout available again in the fall of 2025.
With the recombination or combination that is Rochester Mills now, along with Mills production being brewed at Dragon Mead, are we going to be able to see maybe some smaller batch items that we saw at Rochester Mills Brew Pub, like maybe a Pilsner, like the Pine Knob Pils, or something that is different than what you've mentioned that's kind of always been where Rochester Mills production facility was at?
Yeah, that's our hope. I think we've heard some good feedback from some of our wholesalers that actually a lot of the on-premise retailers have been kind of complaining a little bit, saying, "Hey, everyone's coming out with specialty beers, but they're always in a can or a bottle and draft. Why don't you guys have products that are just on draft so that hey, it's better on draft, right? Hey, nice lead. Instead of that way, it kind of draws some traffic to the actual on-premise locations instead of saying, "Oh, I can just go to the store and pick it up." And so I think that's the plan. Is in addition to the package releases that we would have, anywhere from 4 to 6 draft only releases that would be smaller batches, smaller volumes that are only going to go to so many accounts.
Are your accounts focusing on like the Tri-County area? Are you expanding through the entire state of Michigan? Are you kind of staying in Oakland and Macomb where you guys are brewing and where Mills is?
Well, when we started back up, just about every wholesaler that we used previously with the production brewery was all in for maintaining the distribution of the brand. We had 2 smaller wholesalers that chose not to. We didn't move much volume with them anyway, so it wasn't like a huge hit. But other than that, we're in the majority of the state of Michigan, currently shipping product whenever they order it. So, some of those draft only releases may only focus on the area that's closer to the brewery, just because that's where most of our volume is sold anyway. But that would be the wholesalers that carry or cover that territory kind of go up into, the Bay City area. So you could see it a little bit further than Southeast Michigan, but that might be a focus for some of those limited release items.
We did forget to ask, what are you drinking?
I did not do anything special. Usually my drink of choice at home is Stroh's. So I'm drinking a Stroh's with a nice can koozie from Chris's Vacation. Says the jolliest of assholes, but
do you know where Stroh's is being produced right now? Is that still under the Legacy brand over at Pabst, or is that somewhere else now? Okay.
Yeah. Well, at least it says Milwaukee, so I assume it's at Pabst.
I was just curious because obviously we had the Stroh's Bohemian Pilsner, which is not the official Stroh's, but the official from Brew Detroit, I believe, back a few years ago. But I was curious if Stroh's was still brewing or creating cans. I don't really think I've seen it anytime recently anywhere.
Yeah, other than the old, recipe that's supposed to be the original recipe that probably isn't the original recipe. I think that's the only Stroh's that's out there right now.
I mean, it's as original as it probably is from, when it got to Miller and then, the Pabst Legacy brand. Yeah.
Yep. Just shorts right there.
Shorts. Yeah. Are you a Stroh's over Old Style guy?
Well, you don't find Old Style very often around here, so
you can get Old Style 30 minutes from here, so you can.
I don't seem to see it in the stores near me, but yeah, I mean, I like a lot of the retro beers. I like Pilsners in general, so if I go to a brewery and they got a good Pilsner, I like that. I also like malty beers. I like Oktoberfest and brown ales and anything along that, porters, anything along that line. So, but usually if I'm sitting at home around a bonfire or just hanging out, I'll just drink a couple cans of Stroh's and call it good.
Before I pass it off to Wendy over here, do you think we're finally seeing that course correction of like all the high ABV, high hoppy, crazy adjunct beers where people now just want something crisp, clean, easy to take? Or do you think it's kind of always been here and we're just kind of noticing it because we want to see it?
I think it's always been there, but I think you'll always see the want and the need for those big beers also. An IPA is always going to be king. I don't think any of that's ever really going to go away. You might see a couple of, small peaks and valleys along the way that shift towards a certain style, but I think there's always going to be people that are interested in the bourbon barrel aged beers and the quads and imperial stouts and any other big beers. I
think it has its place, but I feel like it was just everywhere all at once. Like you just could not get away from it. It wasn't as much as Dan always says, a bourbon barrel aged beer isn't seasonal. You can drink it in 110-degree weather because he will. But for me, like I always remembered, like it felt seasonal to have those bourbon barrel aged beers, and now like there was just so many.
Yeah. Yep. I know what you're talking about for sure.
Wendy.
I too am a firm believer that stout season is every season. So I get what Dan's saying when he says that.
It is currently wet January in my neck of the woods. So yeah. Definitely stout season.
Oh, for sure. I will hashtag stout season, even though I really want to hashtag it is every season. But it gets more views if you just hashtag stout season. So let's go a little bit into some of your time on the show. What is one of your favorite memories of being on our show?
Well, I mean, all of them have, certain funny parts to them, but I think I don't know if it was, you'll have to probably, let me know, Dan or Ken, if you know which one it is, but I think the time that me and Aaron and John all showed up at the studio, I mean, we might have done that more than once, but there was one time we were especially imbibing a little bit too much, probably.
So
things got a little crazy that time.
Yeah, so episode 100 was the first time we had all three of you in the studio at once, which we then repeated on episode 200. And then we came into Mill's facility for episode 300.
It was probably 200. We were probably well behaved or decently well behaved on the 100.
So 200 would have been like 2019, 2020.
Yeah, it sounds sounds about right. Now I don't have anything specific other than I know that we were, just got way off course. Definitely didn't stick to any kind of script. Not that there is a script, but yeah, we were saying anything and everything that popped into our heads after drinking 5 or 6 beers, probably.
Yeah, episode 200 was November 2019. And the time before that would have been over in the Twitch. Bolos and Beer says there's a script. I tell you what, there was a script for episode, like the first 3 episodes. We had like an outline. I had this printed out. I'm like, we're gonna take this serious. And I think that might have been the day on that episode where you were in town or something like that. You dropped off like 5 cases for us.
Oh, I remember that one.
You weren't on the show or anything. You literally showed up. You're like, I'm at the door. And I'm like, what do you mean you're at the door? And you're just like, here you go. And for like 4 straight episodes, we drank just Rochester Mills. It was like you were a sponsor at that point. Former guest, of course, Aaron Laketot in the chat.
Look at that.
Not getting in trouble for being on the show this time, that's for sure. Wendy.
I'm not really sure where to go from there. I do remember a few times in studio that I had to wait a little while before I could go anywhere. That's for sure.
Oh.
So
I feel like that was episode 200. I feel like we were all hanging out in the studio for like 3 hours after the show was done.
So moving to home is okay.
yes. Yeah.
It's all safe now.
Well, one, you drink less because you're not going to try 6 beers when
everybody's bringing different beers for you to try. Yeah.
Right. So you definitely, it's definitely changed things a little bit in that case. Ken, I'm going to ask you the same question. I'm going to turn it around on you.
Oh no. I'm going to be honest with y'all. There's 3 that stick out, and they're just because they're guests, and no offense to the guests in front of us. But Bernard Johnson from Unibrew, when he came into town, we had him on. Wow, was that a great interview. Obviously, I always talk about the episode with Nick the Brewer and Unity Vibration, where they controlled the entire show. If you've ever listened to a Nick the Brewer episode, he knows how to talk, that's for sure. But they still, in the back of my mind, how I still know that there's laws about what kind of wood you can use for whiskey barrels, and how they wish they could use different wood for whiskey barrels to then get different whiskey barrels for their beer and their drinks. And then, of course, John Mallett, Bells. Being able to come up to him and just be like, hey, so why do you change the recipe for Oberon every year? Piss everyone off.
That was the best answer that he gave too.
Oh, for sure. I love bringing that up every Oberon day on Reddit. Like, I just repost it.
Oh, yeah.
Well, those are good guesses.
So, Eric, what do you see moving forward for the industry in Michigan? I know we've got a lot of closings. It's been a pretty sad month here. So what do you see going on?
Yeah, well, that's the $1 million question. I think everybody's trying to figure out. It's been, it's not just Michigan. If I'm sure you guys follow or are friends or fans of breweries all over the country. And, I keep seeing posts about this brewery closing after being open for 10 years or 15 years or 20 years. And it's, it's happening all over the place. There's, guilds that are canceling festivals. There's, even the Brewers Association has had some significant staff changes and other challenges that they've had to go through as well. So it's, craft beer is just, it's fighting a lot of other things that are out there. I don't think it's going to be a permanent issue, but we just got to get through or get over the hump, get through the weeds. And, unfortunately, you're going to see some people get thinned out. For one reason or another. There's still companies that are fighting challenges that are post-pandemic issues that might just be, surfacing after, they found a way to fight through and fight through and fight through. And nothing has still rebounded to what it was like pre-COVID. But the breweries kept opening. So there's more and more, places to get beer and other beverages that are out there. You have cannabis that's out there as an issue, and get Aaron to chime in again on that one. So it's a different ball game, and people don't go out as much anymore. So on-premise sales are different compared to what they were 5 years ago. And we'll see. I think the ones, hopefully breweries that have built a longer history, or maybe have a little bit of a piggy bank that they've been filling over the years, might help get through some tough times. Or just ones that run a pretty tight business and haven't had a bunch of fluff or anything else. I mean, every business is different, so there's really no black and white answer, I don't think. But hopefully you'll see that. I know that one of the things that we've kind of noticed, from the Rochester Mills perspective is, okay, this contract arrangement we have with Dragonmead, it's kind of weird not owning your own facility, but the amount of money we would have had to dump into that, instead of just utilizing a facility that's already there with brewing staff that's been there for years and years and years and have proven that they can make quality beer. So I think you might see a little bit more of that, where people are kind of joining forces to weather the storm and maximize capacity at places, instead of having a bunch of breweries that are making it less than 50% of their capacity.
That makes
So I know that
sense.
doesn't tell you where it's going, but it's just, I think it's just it's a big question mark still.
Yeah, I agree with that. The one thing that I've said, even since COVID happened, is that I honestly believe that the breweries out there that are going to make it are the ones that have strong ties in their community. And you can see that in programs like Batch Brewing and Agma, how their hands are all over their community. So, and they're the ones that I'm seeing doing more and more things, I guess I would say. Do you think that that is kind of the right assumption? Is that something that you would end up going with at Rochester?
Oh yeah, I mean that's huge. I mean the Rochester Mills Brew Pub is very involved in the city of Rochester, and have been for pretty much their entire existence there for 25 plus years now. With us as a contract brand for distribution, we kind of are leaning on that brew pub in Rochester as being our public face right now, because we don't have another tap room that's tied to our name. So obviously that entity will continue to be involved in the city of Rochester and the surrounding areas. But we still, we've made some, donations to some community things that go on in the area, in the greater than Rochester area. So that's about all we can do. Those other locations you mentioned, it's great because those communities are really willing to come back and help support those breweries when they know that the breweries have supported them through the years. So it's definitely a big part of it.
So I do have one other question that I kind of want your take on as a brewer. On the last show when we were at Dark Horse, Ed, our editor-in-chief, had mentioned that when he sees a brewery is closing, rather than run out to get one last beer from that brewery, he tends to go to his local brewery because he wants to make sure that those around him he's supporting. Yep. What is your opinion on that?
I know that any brewery that I've gone to when they're closing, including our production brewery tap room when we closed last August, every brewery seems to have their busiest, week or 4 days or whatever in their existence. And it's like everyone, the first response is, well, why didn't you do that all the time? Because it'd be great if you were just there every day. Well, people can't go every day. I understand There's an attachment. Okay, I used to go here once a month and I don't want to see it go away, so I'm going to go there before they close. And it ends up being that everybody that's ever gone there tries to do that. But at that point, if they're already closing, not to say you don't want to, so still support any local business, but yeah, if you have a brewery that's close to you, you want to make sure they don't end up in that position. So I like that idea of going to your existing local pub that is still open and operating and making sure that they get your business. it's not a bad idea.
I agree with that. I had also said that I wish I could single-handedly support all of my favorite breweries in the state of Michigan or even outside of Michigan, but
Right.
until I win the lottery or somehow find a pot
Yeah.
of gold, in the meantime, I'm just doing what I can. Rob, you want to?
Yeah, when my local closed, I remember going in and one guy who I'd never seen there before, and it really was my local. I really was there a lot. I knew pretty much everyone, or they knew me. But he said something along the lines of, "I had no idea this place was even here," which I thought was kind of ridiculous. He then later said he was into craft beer and stuff, and it was, I don't know, it's the only one in town, and if he's and he lived in town, so for him not to know, although part of their downfall is that they were not allowed to put a sign out by the road, but you know, it was all very frustrating. And then we just had the announcement here that Scarlet Lane Brewing is closing, which may not be one that y'all know up there, but they are a fairly old Indianapolis brewery. They've been around for a while. They have just their production facility is so much fun to go to. I'm sad that it's going away. They have a big horror theme going on there. The local horror show, that every big market seems to have one of those goth guys showing scary schlocky horror movies. That was all shot there at their their production brewery, and yeah, so it's sad. It's sad to see them going. But I did kind of want to go back to, you were talking about Rochester Mills and just kind of what it's been through, and my observation on the industry right now is, as an outsider, as a consumer, is that it seems like the places that are closing, it seems like the local places, the ones that aren't maybe distributing so much, are still doing okay. And you guys were in that phase, whether you wanted to or not, for a while, and now you're coming out, and it sounds like you're opening up distribution. Is it possible that's kind of where we're going to start going once the crunch happens?
Well, our situation is somewhat unique in that, in Michigan, the license type that you have will dictate whether or not you can distribute. And so the brew pub in Rochester that's been there for 25 years, they can't distribute beer. So that's never a part of their model. When we opened the Rochester Mills Distribution Brewery back in 2013, it was a whole separate company with different ownership. The only link was that we shared a brand name. And so, it was, at the time, it was Mike's. He separated himself from the brew pub so he could kind of start this distribution brewery. He wanted to see if he wanted to take the brands out to distribution to sell it outside of just the pub in Rochester. There's definitely not a whole lot of profit in distribution beer until you get to a certain size. Which is why a lot of the smaller ones, they struggle. They rely very heavily on the cash coming in at their tap rooms. And like I said, every business model is different. Every brewery is different. So there isn't a cookie cutter answer for how that looks. So the reason we wanted to keep that going is because it was already in existence. I don't know if it wasn't something that we had already been doing for 10 or 12 years. I don't know if 2024 would have been the year we just said, hey, let's jump into distribution. Just because I think that's a pretty challenging model right now. So we were trying to kind of grasp back at that volume that we knew we were already selling or had been selling, and hoping that we can jump right back into that. And, we've recaptured some of it, definitely not all of it. We lost some placement in some of the chain stores that we're looking to regain. But, the wholesalers were pretty excited that we were going to continue selling distribution beer, and so we've had a decent relationship with them. I don't know if you're going to see a bunch of new breweries try to do that at this point, or ones that just haven't done it yet. It's just, I think the market's probably not ideal for starting that or launching that as a new concept for a brewery at this point. But we'll see what happens in the next 12 months or so.
Do you think the length of your name recognition kind of helped with the ability to kind of get back into distro when you moved back in, started brewing at Dragonmead?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it helped too that the wholesalers all wanted to be back on our on side with us. So, they were aware of the brands. We didn't have to resell it to them. Basically, it was, oh, sweet, this is available again. We've had to fill those draft lines with something else. Now we can go back to and say Rochester Red's available again. But I mean, for our size, at our peak, we had hit about 6,500 barrels a year of the Mills beer for 3 or 4 years in a row. That had started to decline when we were doing the Two Roots beer, just because the Two Roots was dictating what we should be selling and producing. And, it was hard to get back to that volume. So, I mean, we're about halfway back to what we were when we dropped off last August. So, we got some ways to go, but I think getting back into the chains will be big. I see Aaron Langtot's talking about self-distribution. But right now, because we're a contract, we're actually under the Dragonmead license. We don't, physically, the company that I work for is almost a marketing company. We don't have a brewing license. So we'd be over the self-distribution limit at this point right now, but that's at 2,000 barrels, I think, is the current limit, not counting taproom beer.
It's
So,
interesting.
It depends how small you are. If you're small enough, self-distribution is definitely an option.
You brought up the red, which I feel like is a unique beer out there on the shelf, on that kind of shelf space. I don't think there are other reds. There aren't that many other reds, and then there aren't sweet reds like that one. I like that beer a lot. So happy to hear it's out there again.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. It really is a very, I don't want to say nondescript. We just call it an Irish style pub red, and it does extremely well on draft, especially in the Oakland and Macomb counties, closer to the brewery. There's a lot of places that carry that, which is nice to have that local support.
Yeah, I was telling you before the show, I used to come up there. I would work in that area for a couple of weeks at a time, and my routine was to drive up, stop at Dark Horse on the way up, and then check into my hotel. And the next day, I would have a meal in the brew pub.
Yep.
Usually Monday, and it would be quieter on Monday, quiet on Tuesday. It was always hopping on Wednesday and Thursday, and I would have to go somewhere else. I just wanted a quiet meal, but yeah, I did enjoy going there a lot. So. There's no question there.
Well, if you're ever up there, and again, you have to let me know.
Yeah, I would love to get up there again. I just hope this customer hires me again.
Well, I, for one, am happy to hear that you are distributed again, because I was a little worried if I did see it that I'd be like, how long have they been holding on to these kegs?
Yeah.
So,
well,
everyone...
the good thing is the draft, it rotated pretty quickly. We didn't have a whole lot of, we had wholesalers that we would monitor the dates of product and stuff pretty good. And for the package, we were out of circulation for a while. And plus we switched to 12-ounce cans as opposed to 16-ounce cans. So if you do see anything in 16-ounce cans out there, that's definitely, it's a little old, and I wouldn't buy it.
Good to know. I do still have some 16-ounce cans in my cellar. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah. That's okay. You try anything.
We did go hard that last night when you guys were closing up and selling the beer for like pennies on the dollar, and I think we had like 2 or 3 dollies worth of beer between me, Wendy, and Dan. So I'm left with the Oktoberfest and the Quad. I drank everything else except for those two. I should have just went with all Rochester Red and Milkshake Stout, and just, it would have probably been gone by now. I want to talk a little bit more as you mentioned that, there's different competition, but are you seeing with the younger generation, a lot of kids drinking less, drinking smarter, drinking healthier? Or is that something that's kind of just like fake news?
I think that there's definitely a trend where it seems like people are drinking less, in that younger crowd, or, that's been the spike in non-alcoholic or low alcohol beers seem to be trending a little higher in that age group. And you also just have people that are, like I said, cannabis is a big thing. People are finding their, whatever state of mind they want to be in through different sources than drinking alcohol. But
well, are we
it's-
seeing this decline in states like Texas that don't have cannabis legalized, or Florida, or is
are
this
you
just
asking me that question, or do you know that answer? Because I don't know that answer.
Or Indiana.
yeah, sadly, I let our Brewers Association membership lapse, but I think what's positive, and I'm sure you saw with the news with the Brewers Association that Bart Watson's now the president,
Yep.
and having the former chief economist person for the Brewers Association be there, I think is going to help move a little bit more to where the market is, at least to understand for the brewers themselves to understand a little bit more where the market is, instead of having Bob Peace, I think was the last president, or was that 2 presidents ago? No offense to Bob, but obviously within this industry, I think change is good. I think you need to constantly turn over these positions instead of having long-standing positions. Because I think as the industry changes and as these new breweries come in, that old guard, I don't think really truly understands what's going on in the world of craft beer. When we had Kevin DeGrid on last week, formerly of North Center Brewing, and he was talking about how Joe Short was talking about marketing and said, yeah, we had our video team. And Kevin was like, what do you video team?
What's a video?
I have an iPhone one, like I can use that. So, and again, no offense to Joe, but there's different levels that some of these breweries are on, and you need these smaller breweries who are out there pounding the pavement, trying to get their name out in positions of at least having their voices heard.
Yeah, and not being afraid to produce items or products that people are asking for. Just because we've always made imperial stouts, and that's what's going to sell. Well, if it doesn't, you have to be willing to make something that is going to sell. If it's not that.
Well, I also think the benefit of the Brewers Guild and the big changeover for the past few years with people like Eric Plata and Jeff Smith and Spalding. Kristen is her name, I believe. Kirsten.
Jason's on the guild board, yeah. But
having these people in there, I think will help move the guild to a better direction, especially because for the past 4.5 years, we've all been flying by the seats of our pants. Like, what COVID changes are going to happen today? What differences are we going to have law wise? What laws can we get around bending right now because we're just trying to stay afloat? I have a question that is more of a theory and an opinion, and I'd like to get your thoughts on it. But obviously the PPP loans back in the early 2020s helped out a lot of people. It helped a lot of businesses stay afloat. I feel like the current, because this is going to be the first year that we're closing more breweries than we're opening. I think that we're finally seeing the resolution of the PPP loans and the people that would have gone out of business naturally in those years, potentially going out of business now. And that was a lifeline for them, where they're able to, many of them probably were able to succeed and brew better. Some of them probably just couldn't keep up with all the changes because you have to invest a lot of money. But is my theory, you think, a good theory regarding the fact that, like, now that the PPP loans are a few years behind us, that the correction is happening more monetary wise?
Yeah, I agree 100%. Yeah, I feel it. Same thing as that a lot of these places, that aren't going to succeed may have gone out of business, like you said, without COVID. If that didn't happen, several years earlier, it was definitely the wild, wild west during the COVID year of people trying to do anything to stay afloat. And like you said, those loans help people definitely to a certain degree. But, there's a lot of people that may have taken out other forms of loans that weren't the PPP loans and weren't forgiven. And now they have to pay that back. And, that could be adding to the struggles, especially as there's a little bit of a downturn in the craft beer business overall. So now your sales are dropping a little bit, and you still have to pay back these loans. If they didn't have the best ways to cut costs or to control costs in the first place, then that's what's going to yield the result you're talking about.
what's been a missed opportunity for the Michigan government to have fixed maybe some old blue laws or something like that to help the craft beer world? Because I see your post every year that you're at, Government Day when you're on the steps of Lansing with all the other brewers. But what is something that our, Congress people in the state haven't really addressed that really needs addressing?
I mean, it's hard to put a blanket statement on that just because of the different brewing licenses and different business types. Trying to find something that actually benefits all different tiers of beer brewing licenses in the state of Michigan is difficult.
Okay, I'm gonna cut you off though. Why do we have to appease all three? Why can't we appease one as long as it's not a negative to the other two?
I mean, no, there would be nothing wrong with that. But from a Brewers Guild standpoint, the members that pay dues to be in to be members of the guild, they always want the guild to fight for them and do something for them. And if it seems that every piece of legislation or something that's out there is only helping the microbreweries and not the brew pubs, then the brew pub membership group gets a little irritated that they feel like the organization isn't looking out for them. They're only looking out for the distribution breweries, or vice versa. So in general, unless there was something huge that would go towards one side or the other, the guild tends to go for middle of the road items that'll kind of benefit everybody. One of the biggest things is taxes. Everyone pays taxes. That's the one thing that will help everybody is to, if there were a reduction in beer taxes, kind of like the Fed did several years ago, where they cut the federal beer tax in half. That was huge. Michigan's, I think one of the higher state beer taxes in the region anyway, at least in the Midwest. And, it'd be nice if that were to be reduced at some point. But again, you're still, in the grand scheme of things, you're not talking tons of money. Is that going to make or break a brewery? Probably not. Is it helpful? Sure, because they could take that money and use it to repair the piece of equipment that they haven't been able to do. But, it's the, every dollar helps, but it's not like that's going to, if your brewery is going to fail because your taxes are $1 more a barrel than you're making, you probably have other things that you should look at too.
There's a different brewery near me that closed quite a while back, and their municipality was charging their water and sewer based on water intake, and everything was going out in bottles and cans, so it was not going down the sewer, but they were not getting any breaks or anything. So that was that messed up all their financials apparently. So that was part of why they closed, but this was quite a while ago, well before COVID.
Oh, I can vouch for that's a big one too, because there's the Great Lakes Water Authority they kind of levied a surcharge on breweries that are in their territory. So it's not even a statewide thing. And it's not even every brewery. Some of them haven't been caught for some reason, but all of a sudden they said, yeah, we're going to start charging you this much money per barrel of production. Had no basis for whatsoever. And that they didn't know how to do it. It's like, well, why are you charging the restaurants a surcharge? Well, there's too many of them that we can't keep track of them. That was their reasoning. Whereas there aren't as many breweries, so it's easy for us to follow. And we're like, well, that doesn't make any sense. And there were a couple places where they were going to force them to put in these giant water treatment facilities and or water straining facilities for their wastewater. At one point they were going to make me install something that was going to cost me $50,000. I was like, what? Are you kidding me? And I just weaseled around the point too many times to finally talk them into saying, I'll just pay an outside service to test my wastewater for me once a quarter and call it good. And they lived with it. And I just controlled what went down the drain when they were testing the water. It sounds silly. But we weren't putting anything terrible down the drain anyway. Right. They're concerned. We have all kinds of auto companies and things that are probably putting all kinds of trash down the drain, but let's pick on the breweries that are putting water and chemicals down the drain pretty much. So, but yeah, that definitely is if they start making you try to treat your water or do other weird things, that definitely could be a huge payment.
Yeah, you can't even charge back for the reverse osmosis or any of that stuff to make the water usable.
Exactly.
Well, I'm thankful that you have come on today to kind of talk about the industry itself. But I want to hear a little bit more about the future of Mills, the brew pub, and everything like that. Like, what can we expect to see in 2025 from you and your team?
Well, I hinted a little bit at what we're hoping to release for beers next year. And we're still assuming that we stay with the agreement we have with Dragamede. We've already added some equipment in there, so I mean, it's looking like it's more of a longer term relationship than just a short term fix, which is fine. It's been working for us, but we want to make sure that if we do want to add a few more tanks, maybe to make sure that if we want to expand our distribution list, that it's not going to impede, Dragamede putting out any products that they have on their calendar. And again, like I said, or any other, partner brews or contract brews that maybe come into the mix. So that'd be, the first thing is just continuing that growth and reestablishing the brand. Cause really we haven't had a whole year of having package out there yet. So, getting people used to having 12-ounce cans instead of 16-ounce cans. And, like I said, getting back into the chains would be a big part for that. As far as the brand overall, I mean, the brew pub is still kicking pretty good. It's like I said, it's been over 25 years they've been open. We're hoping to possibly re-establish Oktoberfest as an event in Rochester. We haven't done that since COVID. That used to be a fairly large event where we'd go through 100 to 120 kegs in a day and a half out in a beer tent in the parking lot. And that was a fairly large event that the city embraced as well. They used to put banners up in town saying, advertising that there was an Oktoberfest in town. So, that was a nice family friendly event. So hopefully we'll get back to doing that in Rochester. And I think that, it's all about trying to get that volume back for us. I mean, we just have to reconnect with people and rebuild those relationships that we kind of lost over that 4 to 6 months that we were out of circulation.
What's your favorite Mills beer?
When I was at the production brewery in the tap room, I would always drink Juice Bigelow. It was kind of a go-to thing for me, which is weird because I'm not an IPA guy necessarily, but for whatever reason, New England IPAs, they don't have that harsh bitterness as much as a traditional IPA. Other than that, though, like I said, I really like malty beers. So Oktoberfest, when we made that, the regular milkshake stout, I'm not a huge fan of all the flavored stouts that we make or anybody else makes. It's just not my thing. But I know when I go to the brew pub location, I like to drink the porter over there is one of my favorites. Or Pine Knot Pilsner. That was always good too when we made that.
Pine Knot Pils is just such a good beer, and I want it here, like in my hands, and it's kind of sad that I can't get that, and you're so far away.
Yeah, Ypsilanti, you're on the other side of the world now.
I know. I at least have Euchre Pills out of Arbor Brewing, which is a solid little pills over here. And it sucks because I haven't really gotten the opportunity to, but I'm right over at Ipsy Ale House too, and he makes such good true to style beers that it's always under everyone's radar because it's kind of downtown Ann Arbor or Ipsy. So people kind of skip past it to go to Corner or to go to Depot Town. So if you're in Ypsilanti, Ipsy Ale House is definitely a place you should get going. Rob, Wendy, do you guys have any more questions before we get to our final ones?
I'm kind of curious with the culture, I guess, of the industry right now, where are brewers, breweries, owners, etc., still getting together as often as it felt like they used to? Like, are guild meetings still as, I don't know, animated or combative, or like, are the owners and brewers still all talking across the breweries and making all those bonds that you used to?
Well, that's a good question. We have our annual meeting coming up in January in Kalamazoo, so we'll see if anything fun and interesting happens there. But in general, I think it just goes, there are definitely a lot of pockets and groups of people that are fairly close. My wife, Amanda, and I, we started a little brewer dive bar get together that we try to do monthly with just our closer circle of people that we're good friends with that work at breweries or own breweries. And we, pick a dive bar somewhere that's so people are not in their workplace. They're not having to look over their shoulder and wonder what's that noise, or did I turn the water off, or hey, this person needs help in the kitchen. Let's go somewhere and drink some bottles of PBR or Stroh's or whatever beer you want to, and just, you know, shoot the shit over nothing. It can be work stuff, it can be sports, it can be whatever, get you out of the element. And also just kind of continue the camaraderie and, you know, keep those personal relationships over and above the business relationships. I think moving forward with the state of the industry the way it is, that you might start seeing some owners be a little more cutthroat. You know, it's going to be coming down to, hey, I need to survive. I need my business to survive. And what's that going to take, you know, short of doing something illegal or personally harmful to somebody. But, you know, when it comes to, you know, recommending someone else's beer, you know, out of the blue, maybe that will happen less. I don't really know. But I think, you know, in general, when we get together, or anybody I've seen get together, you know, there's still good vibes there. People still enjoy each other's company, having a beer and socializing without, you know, having to point fingers and start yelling at somebody. So hopefully now it doesn't get to that point. And hey, look, Amanda just chimed in, Brewery Dive Bar night. And, you know, hopefully that people just continue to keep that camaraderie going. But, you know, like I said, it is in pockets, because there are a bunch of new breweries that I don't really know people at. But a lot of those guys seem to know each other, you know, for whatever reason, whether it's geographically or just because they've kind of bonded together, saying that, hey, we've all been in the industry for less than 2 years. Let's hang out and talk to each other. And then people that have been in the industry for 20 years tend to hang out and talk to each other. So I don't think there's for any reason. I don't think either group has tried to shut out the other group. It just, for whatever reason, it's happened that way.
They're just hitting the different problems that they have to solve.
Yeah, true. They're at different stages of their business, and but, you know, hopefully, all of us that have been in there for a while, we always say, you know, we would love to talk to the new guys and answer questions, because anything they're going through now is something we've definitely gone through. Maybe without an iPhone and Facebook, but we've all gone through the problem.
Right. It was just 15, 20 years ago. It was always a rising tide, you know, raises all ships. And I feel like I haven't heard that in a brewery for quite a while, but I used to hear it regularly. So
yeah, I think it still exists. Whether or not it exists like as a blanket statement for everybody, I don't know. But there definitely are. There's a long list of people that I'd bend over backwards for to help out if I had to, and think they do the same thing.
I think the clicks are always there. I think being in the industry the way we are, we get to see them, where we get to see the folks like Arctic Circle, Loaded Dice, and like North Center. Like, you know, a lot of them were each other, where they relied on each other for the knowledge, like, or Gordia, Cadillac Straits, like the geographical into that, you know, southeastern Michigan area, but also like the new kid on the block. And I think a lot of them might be, if they're not as forthcoming when it comes to opening up a brewery, like they may be afraid to talk to someone like Spencer over at Dragon Meat, even though Spencer would, you know, grab a beer and sit down and chat with you about beer. Even someone like, you know, your wife, Amanda, who's an amazing brewer, would sit down and be like, you know, hey, this is what, you know, you might want to do with your brewery that we see, you know, that we do. So I think a lot of it is there. What we don't see is that there isn't really a general location for you all to have these types of meetings. And even when you see it at that January event over in Kalamazoo, like everyone's kind of clicked together. No one really, you know, opens up their circle to other people. So people usually find the smaller breweries to talk to each other, because they're the ones kind of going through it right now and utilizing that information. So I think maybe, you know, next year or next month when that comes, you might want to, you know, look into building that type of and the royal you, not you specifically, Eric. I'm not putting this entire onus on you. But having, you know, a little bit more social events where, you know, dare I say team building exercises, where you're just forcefully bringing other brewers to talk to each other that they don't know, especially if you know, segregate it to different quadrants in the state. You know, it'd be nice to see what's going on over at By George up in Munising. And, how are you doing that up there in Munising? And why can't I recreate this type of magic up in Elkona? That I think everyone needs it's on the new brewers to be more forthcoming, and it's on the old brewers to be a little bit more, hey, let me talk to you. Oh, hey, where you from?
Yeah. And I'll even go the next step too, and saying that you mentioned like, hey, Amanda or Spencer be more than happy to talk to those guys, but that street goes both ways, and a fresh set of eyes and a fresh thought process from some of the newer brewers would be great for people that have been around for a while to hear that, because they, there's a lot of times we get stuck in our ways, and this is the way we've done it forever, and you're not even thinking outside that box, whereas a lot of those guys are thinking outside the box. So it's all good information to share both ways.
A lot of it can also be because of money rise, like you're buying specific malts or specific hops or specific ingredients just because it's cost efficient for you to brew your beer, and you might find something that's a lot different that you don't normally brew an amber with this specific hop typically, but because this was the only hop that was available to get to me so I can make it, this is what we built. Eric, thank you so much for joining us. As we end each and every show, we ask a fun, entertaining question of our guests before we let you tell everyone where they can find you and they can find your beer. Rob, what is your final question for Eric here?
What was the last board game or card game that you played? Did you win?
Well, see, I kind of was an outside player with some Pictionary this afternoon, but I wasn't really playing and it wasn't official. But outside of that, probably euchre, and I probably won as much as I lost.
Such a good Midwest answer.
Wendy.
Since it's at the Christmas season, let's go with, what is your favorite Christmas movie?
Favorite Christmas movie? Well, all time probably is Christmas Vacation, as I have all these canned cases I showed you earlier. I don't know. I like them all. I'm a Christmas person the whole time. So I mean, we'll watch Christmas movies year round. And as much as I'd hate to admit it, my wife and I will binge watch some Hallmark Christmas movies. So as cheesy as those are, up there, Amanda's going to say hi.
I know I'm not supposed to ask.
Hey, Amanda.
I know I'm not supposed to ask a follow-up question then, but how do you guys feel about Hot Frosty?
Oh, we haven't watched it yet.
Oh, you got to watch it. I think it's hilarious. It's my new favorite Christmas movie.
It looks like she saved all the stuff she's not supposed to say on Hallmark for that movie.
Right. Well, I just like it because it's kind of tongue-in-cheek. It checks all the boxes of a Hallmark movie, but you're definitely making it fun of the fact that it's a cheesy Hallmark movie.
Yep. And that's good. You got to be able to laugh at yourself, right?
Exactly.
Eric, I've probably asked you 150 questions between all of these podcasts, so I am going to ask one final question that you will never have expected. What is your favorite Faygo flavor?
Ooh, favorite Faygo flavor's got to be Rock and Rye.
Rock and Rye.
Yep. I did buy some of the Honolulu Blue just because of the Lions, but I wasn't quite sure I liked it. The cream. I think that's a cream ale or a cream soda. Sorry, cream ale. Got beer on my mind. I'm a Rock and Rye guy, though, when it comes to Faygo.
All right. That is going to do it for this episode. I believe it's 358. That's right, of the Better on Draft podcast. Eric, where can they find Rochester Mills?
Well, you can go to beerco's.com as a website, and we're working on adding a beer finder to that. That'll help in the future, but you can always email me at eric@themillsbeer.com, and I can answer any questions you want.
All right. For Eric, Wendy, Rob, and myself, thank you so much for joining us. This is the last episode of the year, the last episode for me. Don't worry, I'll probably show up here and there, as I'm sure they'll ask me to come on to give my opinion on things, but that is going to do it for myself, signing off for my final episode of Better on Draft. And no matter what you think of your beer, we think it's Better on Draft. Have a good night, and thank you all for listening.
Cheers.
Thank you.